This is the second video of two videos that goes over analysis of AMPT performance test data using FlexMAT. In the first video we reviewed FlexMAT cracking, and in this video we're going to look at FlexMAT rutting. If you have not watched the first video, you may want to watch it before watching this one. It's not absolutely required, but there may be some details regarding file structure that are outlined in more detail in the other video than are going to be discussed here. The first thing to note with FlexMAT rutting is in version 1.1 we have actually three files that come together. I'm highlighting them here on the screen. When you download FlexMAT rutting, you're going to want to make sure that you get all three of these files and make sure that you put them in the same directory. You also want to make sure, because FlexMAT rutting will calculate an index parameter for rutting, and in doing that it uses a little bit of MATLAB code to facilitate the calculation. Now if you're running this on a program, on a computer where you have installed FlexPave, you will have the correct version of the runtime file, and so you don't need to take any other action other than putting all three of these files in the same location. If you're going to analyze this test data on a computer where you do not have FlexPave installed, reach out to the NCSU research team and we can tell you which version of the runtime file is appropriate and that you will need to download and install prior to running the index parameter. What I'll show you in the first part of the video, which is simply analyzing the stress sweep rutting test data in order to determine the coefficients for FlexPave analysis, that itself does not require that runtime engine. It is only necessary if you're going to be calculating the index parameter for ranking and comparing mixtures. So the first thing you're going to want to do is download and put all three of these files in the same location. The second thing you're going to want to do, if this is the first time you've run FlexMAT rutting, is to open the file. Again, make sure that the file that your Excel has enabled the macros, and if not, then you'll need to talk to your IT support staff in order to facilitate that. Once you've opened it, you'll want to save it to your local directory on your computer. Doing so will ensure that the macros are trusted and that the software will run. The spreadsheet itself has a very similar format to what you see from FlexMAT cracking. We have different tabs, one for instructions, one for input data, one for the model coefficients, one to generate input files for FlexPave, and then another one called code inputs, which for now are not an important component, but that you do not want to modify. So, using the spreadsheet is going to require us to first input the data. Before we do that, I want to take a moment to discuss file format, or format of file structure. So what we saw in the previous video is that our file structure is done in a way that we have individual files for each test result. Under stress sweep case, we're going to have two subfolders, one for temperature high and one for temperature low. In temperature high, we'll have two files. These files are exported from the UTS AMPT control software. And you'll notice that in this particular example, just by the naming convention that we have followed, we have 45 degrees Celsius test, and this happens to be specimen 5 and specimen 6 for this particular mixture. If I go into T-low, we have again two tests, one file for each test. This particular example, the low temperature test was done at 20 degrees Celsius, and we happen to use specimens 3 and 4 from this mixture. So it is important that you structure your files in this way. Here we have two folders, one for temperature high, one for temperature low, and the exported files are located directly in those. Now, to show you how to run the analysis, the first thing I'm going to do is clear all the data. And then the second thing is I need to tell the software how many replicates or how many specimens are available at each temperature. As we saw in the file structure, we have 2 specimens for each low and high. And once you insert the number of specimens, these load buttons become active and we can load the data. To load the data, we're going to select the folder in which we have high temperature test data. You can always look at the top and it tells us to select a folder for high temperature test data. To do this, you need to select the high temperature folder by clicking one time and then hitting OK. When you do that, you'll see that the spreadsheet has pulled in the necessary data. We will do the same thing to load the low temperature data. I'll select the button. You'll notice at the top, select a folder for low temperature data, click one time, and then press OK. The spreadsheet then loads the data, and on its own it will fit the reference model and calculate the shift factor coefficients. Now this process can take a little bit of time depending on your computer, but you'll notice that as I've done that, we see the test data. We can see 2 replicates at each of the high and the low temperature. You'll also use this as an opportunity to make sure that the test was run in the appropriate loading pattern. And you can see that at high temperature we have a fast rate followed by a relatively low rate and then a fast rate again because the stress levels is higher in the first cycle than the second, and then the third increases again in the case of high temperature, and in the case of low temperature the stress levels increase in each loading block. If you're not familiar with this process, I suggest you review some of the notes and study materials that were provided at the AMPT workshop or that you have been provided when this spreadsheet and video were sent to you. Once we've created the model coefficients, we then want to export this into FlexPave. To do that, I go to the Input to FlexPave tab. You'll see the reference model coefficients are listed in column B. And in order to generate the output file, I'm going to select Export FlexPave. I'll go to the same folder where I exported the dynamic modulus and fatigue test, and I'm just going to append this with the name of the particular mix that I'm using, which I'm going to call, as I did before, example. Once you've done that, if you press save, now the spreadsheet has created that file, and you can see it here, Rutting Test Example. This is the file that you would load into FlexPave in order to complete a pavement simulation. Now, if this is all that you wanted to do, which was run FlexPave, then you are essentially done with the analysis of this material. However, if your goal is to identify the rutting index parameter, you will need to go through a few additional steps. The first step that you're going to need to go through is to save FlexMAT Rutting with your newly imported and analyzed test data already embedded into it. This is best done if you save the file along with an appended name of the mix that you're dealing with. This will allow you to keep the spreadsheet separated so that you can go back and review them if you need to at a later date. We've been using the name example for this case, so I'll continue to use that here, and I'll append example at the end. Now, in order to run the analysis, for index parameter, you need to select a few different factors. The first is the location for your analysis. In this case, I will choose to do it in another place randomly. We'll go with Pennsylvania, and I'm going to select the city from Pennsylvania for which the software has already preloaded in some climate data. Okay, this aspect of the spreadsheet may change over time, but the basic idea is that we're inputting the geographical location for the mix that we're analyzing. We also will need to select which layer we're working with. There are 3 options: surface, intermediate, and base. The default in this case was the base layer, so just to keep it different, I'm going to choose the surface layer. Again, to make sure that there are no errors or issues in running the software, I'll save the spreadsheet once I've made those changes. To calculate the index parameter, we're going to select this Rutting Allowable Traffic button. Now once I do that, you will notice that nothing seems to happen, and that's because the spreadsheet is working in the background. In the current version, the one that I'm using for this demo, there is no indicator that the spreadsheet is working in the background. So you'll just need to be patient in order for some additional action to occur after you hit the button one time. You do not need to hit the button repeatedly. Depending on the computer, it may take a little bit of time for this to happen. So here I press the Rutting button. You'll notice that you had a busy cursor for just a moment, and then the button switched back. Now this is being done in real time, and so you see that fairly quickly my computer loaded up a dialog box that asks us to select the FlexMAT file. This is a little bit awkward, but the way that the spreadsheet is working is that it asks us to select the same file that we've been working on. You'll notice that it is the one that's open, and it's the one that we saved before, which is FlexMAT Rutting version 1.1_example. This is somewhat awkward because the spreadsheet already knows its pathway, but based on the coding that had to be done to make this work, we have to physically select it again. So I'm going to select example. You can either double click or select once, as I'm doing here, and press open. Now the software begins to do its analysis. It's running a calculation behind the scenes to estimate the allowable rutting traffic. Okay, it's been about 30 seconds in real time, and at the end of that 30 seconds, the spreadsheet produces a file, opens a file called Rutting Index Parameter that tells you what is the allowable traffic for 20 years for that particular location and that particular mix. You can read about the analysis details and the threshold values that are predicted or used to establish this allowable traffic in some of the literature and documents that may have been provided to you. The ultimate result of that analysis is the number of allowable traffic loadings for that particular mix. In this particular mix, it happens to be very high, greater than 30 million easels. This is the end of the analysis that you will perform using FlexMAT Rutting. The outcomes of the analysis, to recap, will include an exported Rutting test example or Rutting test file for use in FlexPave, and if so desired, an index of allowable traffic levels for your particular mix in the location that you are analyzing. I hope this video has been helpful to explain the use of FlexMAT Rutting. If you have any questions, please be sure to contact us or let us know if you have any issues following the video or performing the analysis on your computer. Thank you.